Please take your seats. Call this council meeting to order and ask if there is any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, we have no presentations or petitions. We do have delegations. And I'd ask Riani DeWitt to please come forward. Address council. You have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors. My name is Riani DeWitt. I am a resident of Waterloo, but I'm here today as the co-chairperson of the Waterloo Region Health Coalition. And with me is Mr. Jim Stewart, who's also a Waterloo resident and my fellow co-chair. So we are here today to express some concern about the province's proposed cuts to public health units in the province. We have seen the current provincial government cutting funding for safe consumption sites in the province in the midst of an opioid crisis. We have seen cuts in the investment in developing dementia strategies, as well as in mental health funding, at a time when we are faced with increasing numbers of people who are confronting mental illness, mental health problems, and sadly, a lot of young people who are committing suicide. We are facing inadequate funding for our hospitals, while we're facing an aging population and hallway medicine. And now we are looking at cuts in public health units, while we have a spike in anti-vaccination propaganda, outbreaks in measles, a rise in STDs, and regular outbreaks of E. coli. This is reckless. On the one hand, the government is relaxing rules that would allow companies to dump toxins in our water. On the other hand, they are closing public units and public labs that would be testing for toxins in water. Public health is the bastion of our healthcare system. It is what keeps us, especially if we live in urban and peri-urban areas, from becoming petri dishes for the outbreak and flourishing of preventable epidemic diseases and infections. Going from 35 to 10 units is not streamlining. Cutting $200 million from our public health unit budget is not making anything more efficient. What it is foolhardy and it is dangerous. It is identifying a problem and then solving that problem by making it worse. This has serious implications for the health and well-being of our communities. What we need is more devolution of functions, of powers, and of resources, not the usurpation and power grab that we are seeing. The point of public health units is to educate about the factors that bring about public health. It is to test for the things that would prevent public health. And it is to prevent public health threats and keeping people healthy and out of the hospitals. It is the most fundamental and cost-effective component of our public health care system. According to the Canadian Public Health Association, from the 1900s to now, the average lifespan of Canadians have increased by 30 years. 25 of those years are attributed to the efforts of public health campaigns, efforts, and units. This is not a service we can skimp on. If anything, we need more of them. We need them more localized, and we need more funding for them. I'm going to ask my colleague Jim to just conclude this for us.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and councillors. I'd like to just conclude by speaking a little bit about the restructuring of our public health care system under Bill 74 proposed by the Ford administration. This is an incredibly far-reaching act that will destabilize our entire public health care system by providing the superpowers under the super agency to restructure, dismantle, and reorganize at enormous costs our public health care system. The problem with this particular bill is that there's absolutely no involvement by the public. There has been no solicitation of your views as a regional government on the establishment of this legislation. There's been absolutely no ability, there will be no ability to consult with the super agency. The super agency's powers will be completely unfettered and will allow the super agency to do whatever it deems appropriate with respect to transferring the public assets of our public healthcare system to the private domain. So this is something that we in the Health Coalition, and I'm sure the regional government is extremely concerned about, this complete evolution to a central committee in Toronto to control all of our public healthcare system and actually change it dramatically. So, to conclude, with respect to Bill 74, it's our considered opinion that this master plan will really take basically 3 steps to accomplish. One is the movement of our public assets, which includes people, technologies, networks, infrastructure, including buildings, to the private domain. And once Number 2, that has been achieved, and that our healthcare system is now in the hands of private conglomerates, and these conglomerates could range from 30 to 50. There's no definition in the legislation about how many there would even be, and in this case, the details absolutely do matter. Once that transfer has occurred, it's very reasonable to anticipate that the very third and final step will be the privatization of Medicare, and that we will have basically an American-style Medicare system in Ontario. That's something that we're totally opposed to, and we're soliciting the support of the regional government in this fight, simply because, we believe this is the most profoundly undemocratic bill that we've seen put forward. As I mentioned earlier, this was done in secrecy. It was done behind closed doors. It's been rushed through the legislature in Queen's Park to disallow any basic public understanding of what the ramifications are of this bill. And secondly, there's been no analysis on the financial side. And we have seen from previous examples that the costs associated with this kind of massive disruption and restructuring of healthcare has been enormous. And in 1995 and 1997, just to quote you one example, under the Harris government, the plan was to restructure major hospitals across Ontario to save $800 million. So that seemed like a reasonable financial plan. But it cost $3.9 billion to achieve that level of restructuring. So that's an example of the cost of this type of dismantling and mega mergers, et cetera. And what we're asking is, why is there actually no financial accountability with this legislation? Why is there no plan being provided? How much is this going to cost us? How many billions will this cost the region and obviously the rest of Ontario? And how long will it take to achieve? Thank you for listening to our concerns.
Thank you, Jim. I was somewhat generous and gave you the 3 minutes you would have gotten if you hadn't registered previously. I have a question, so stay where you are. Councillor Bravanovich.
Thank you very much, Chair Redmond, and thank you for coming in today and making that presentation. And, you know, I think many of us share some of your concerns. But since this super agency was announced, we've also learned that the province is looking at taking the public health units that exist in municipalities and bringing them down to 10 and doing the same with ambulance services. Have you put your thoughts around that yet, or is that too new and too fresh to?
It's quite new, but we have had some time to consider what the result of that will be. And as Riani was speaking to initially in her address, the fundamental flaw with this plan is that we're going to be reducing the financial responsibility of the Government of Ontario towards public health units by $200 million. That's 1/3 of the total revenue for those. facilities. There's going to be this restructuring, as you mentioned, to 10. So these 10 super regions will be in distant locations. So you have to ask yourself again, what will be the response time? And finally, if you start reducing the size of these organizations, that's really reducing their ability to have any level of capacity to respond to these types of crises that we see, especially with EMS, which is a very similar sort of a plan that was just announced today.
Right.
Riani, do you want to speak to it?
Yes, I just want to add that very fundamental to public health and to a large extent to MS services as well, is their understanding of the communities within which they operate. So the more decentralized you can have it, the better they function. But when you start centralizing, you are removing that local knowledge out of the locality where they're supposed to operate. And invariably what happens is, let's say for instance, Waterloo is the center that has to serve a 100-kilometer radius. The preference will always go to the largest center. If there's a call for 5 ambulances and there are only 4 ambulances, the priority will go to the calls in Waterloo. So if you're in a distant area, you are going to be at the bottom of every list of response. You're not going to be the first point of call.
Can I just add one other thing there, and that is really around things like the vaccine crisis that we're facing right now. So this restructuring of public health units also is not only cutting the services, but it's creating chaos. If anyone has ever lived through any kind of amalgamation or restructuring, you know that it takes many years, many months to get things sorted out about who's doing what and how it will be achieved. And if we're faced with a variety of different concerns that Riani has already alluded to, that chaotic regime in these 10 super public health units is probably not going to be beneficial for our population.
And the second question I had, thank you for those answers. You're obviously representative of the health coalition here in Waterloo region, but imagine there's similar groups across the province. Are you connected at all with them? And is there some broader advocacy strategy that you're looking to undertake across the province?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we are a component of the Ontario Health Coalition, which in itself is a component of the Canadian Health Coalition. Our primary function is to support public health care across our country, and that goes beyond all political stripes. But yes, we are very much trying to advocate on behalf of public health care. On April 30th, we'll have a massive rally at Queen's Park to demonstrate our dissatisfaction with Bill 74. And there are a number of ongoing actions. There was one today during the Day of Action that was organized by local labor groups, by local action, community action groups like ourselves, and by local healthcare and environmental groups as well. So it's ongoing, it's everywhere. There's a huge amount of dissatisfaction. We are not in a bubble here in Waterloo region. In fact, I think that we're very consistent with the rest of the province of Ontario with their dissatisfaction, considering the fact that we haven't been informed, we haven't had a chance to respond, and most people are completely unaware of the implications of Bill 74.
Thank you very much for coming in and for sharing these concerns with us.
Councillor McGarry?
Thank you very much. And in my former role, I've been a nurse for over 35 years at home in the CCAC, now the LIN, as a care coordinator and also in acute care hospitals as a critical care nurse. So I've been through the cycles of centralization versus decentralization versus eliminating emergency rooms to reduce them under the Harris government, and the concerns and the alarms that were sounded from really all aspects of healthcare, including the public, at that particular time. This this list that you've got out here under Bill 74, the super agency, is extremely concerning. I think you've got a lot of the points right in how much it's going to cost, how long it takes. And I know from personal experience that it's extraordinarily difficult to continue to manage the acute care needs of our population while you're undergoing restructuring. The chaos, the inability to get your IT systems up and going means that there are often gaps in a number of different critical places, whether it's your dispatch for your emergency services or your ability to function as an individual in a time period when all records in the hospital, for instance, are online, and they're then not talking to other agencies or other hospitals or other medical practitioners because the system's undergoing change. So I have a lot of grave concerns. I think Councillor Verbanovic did ask a couple of the questions that I was going to, which is what is your plan for ongoing advocacy? And to sound some of the alarms, will you be costing out some of the particular issues that you see moving forward? And I think the only other question that I really had was regarding some of the changes around some of the public perception and some of the meetings that have been done in public won't be in the future. Can you weigh in on what the public can do and what they'll be able to learn from these changes in the near future?
Yeah, let me start. It's with your last question. It is incredibly difficult, and I'll explain why now. We recently had a town hall in the Kitchener Rotunda on Bill 74. We expected 50 to 80 people. We had about 150 people who showed up. And they were extremely concerned about what they heard. We have ongoing action in front of some of our local MPP's offices. We've got ongoing petitions. But part of the problem is when you are faced with a government that is utterly contemptuous and unresponsive. When you try to set meetings with MPPs for 2 months.
Riani, we're just going to get you plugged in again.
Okay. So when you've tried for 2 months to set up a meeting with an MPP and you're constantly denied, it becomes very difficult to get your voice across. When you then meet with an MPP who then sits and looks at you with blank eyes, nods nicely, shrugs, and basically gives you an attitude of, well, we're in government so we can do whatever we want. When there are no white papers, when there are no policy discussions, it really feels as if democracy is being stripped out from under your feet. So in terms of what to do, it becomes limited. But we will not be silent about it. And like Jim referred to the public action on the 30th, a year ago there was a public action about cuts to the healthcare budget in Toronto. We could not get 20 people from Waterloo to go. We have already booked 2 buses for an event that is 3 weeks out. The second bus is fast filling up, and there's even a possibility that we might have to solicit a 3rd bus. So yes, the public is aware, and the more they become aware, the angrier they are getting. This is not going down well with people once they know what it entails.
Thank you.
If I could just briefly add, one of the other actions that we are taking is to solicit support from various levels of government, including municipal governments and regional governments like yourselves, and to request that we would be at your disposal to provide some level of political action to voice our concern on behalf or in support of the regional government or of the cities of our region or the municipalities of our region. So we have actually been stonewalled. We were locked. We weren't able to even attend the lockup for the budget review, which is dreadful. The first time that's ever occurred. And with respect to costing of this plan, the legislation is incredibly vague in its language. incredibly vague. There is no, as I mentioned earlier, no costing associated with any of the language. There's also, interestingly, no mention of the word patient in the Bill 74, despite the rhetoric of the government talking about patient-centered care. We know it's not at all. So the costing piece, we will continue to try and understand what that looks like and reflect that back to you so that you can understand what these cuts truly mean, but they are enormous.
Thank you.
Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for coming in. This is, of course, pretty fresh off the press, caught us by surprise as well, and we really haven't had a chance to digest it yet and have a fuller discussion. I'm sure that'll be coming soon, but we really have more questions than we have answers, and there are more questions every day. And you've posed a few new ones today as well to add to the list. I would encourage you, as you go about your advocacy, is to not forget about other implications that you might not think of in terms of the public health department being taken away from the municipalities. So, for instance, you might not think of these things. So public health is integrated into a lot of our other program areas. I mean, there is the direct service they provide, restaurant inspections, et cetera, et cetera. But did you know that public health is on the master transportation or the transportation master plan? Did you know that public health is on the light rail transit steering committee? We have public health integrated into all kinds of different projects in our municipality that I fear we're going to lose in addition to those direct service areas. And the integration of public health with our social services department is, of course, probably the greatest one that I fear losing, because there's so many common interests between the social services area and public health, with the root causes of illness and the root causes of crime and the social determinants of a lot of issues that we deal with, that public health and social services and other departments in our portfolio deal with. And that's what I fear a lot, and maybe not as intuitive to the average person. So I would encourage you to include those concerns as you advocate.
Well, we certainly will. Just to echo on that, one of the primary drivers of the total cost of public education is the effectiveness of public health units. And consequently, as you mentioned, because they are so wide-ranging, if public health units are decimated, we can also anticipate steep rises in costs to public education.
I want to thank you. I see no more questions. I want to thank you very much for coming. And so it's Riani, and is it Jeremy or?
Jim.
Jim, okay. Jim, thank you. Just for your information, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario is turning their mind to all of these issues. Certainly the shrinking of public health units is a huge concern to municipalities right across Ontario, and the paramedics being consolidated. These are things that I don't think anybody anticipated seeing in the budget. So you should know that we're in common cause, and we will continue to advocate to see that we can get a more transparent result in this, and what these changes mean, what the funding model is, what governance looks like. These are all things that have yet to unfold, and I'm sure the government will comment on them. So thank you very much for coming in. It's a very important issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Next delegation that I have registered is Chris Peterson, and this is on consumption and treatment site recommendations, I believe. Welcome, Chris. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. I like that 150 Duke Street West will become the new CTS. This building is large, wheelchair accessible, and on the light LRT. I think part of the building could be used as a temporary site while the other part is being renovated. This makes economic sense, and it is also good for the CTS clients. This will prevent them from getting used to going to one location and having to change to another after. I'm worried that 115 Water Street North will become a temporary site. The reason I think so is because Joe Mancini showed a drawing at the 115 Water Street North with 4 injection booths at the last Community Service Committee meeting. He also mentioned about hydrophobia clinic, and I think the temporary site and Mr. Mancini plans for this hydrophobia clinic could go to 150 Duke Street West, where all the services should be offered. My neighbors and I objected to this CTS site at 115 Water Street North and will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. The next registered delegation is Lovenia Mtowa. Welcome, Lovenia. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council. My name is Lovenia, and I'm the manager at the ARC Home Center located at 125 Water Street North. The home center houses 27 clients with mental and physical disabilities. Most of them are mental. They have mental issues, and some of them are on probation from drug use, and they're told to stay away within probation limits. So that's what we're kind of concerned with a temporary consumption site opening next door to us. Some of the residents have expressed that to members of staff and anybody who listened. I think a few of them have gone to the news. So from the initial public announcement that 115 Water Street was proposed as the potential CTS site, we have actively been trying to write letters to all levels of government buildings, including yourselves. We have attended both Community Service Committee meetings as well as the CTS consultation sessions. We agree with the City of Kitchener and Waterloo Region's decision to approve 150 Duke as a location for the proposed location for the CTS site. For the same reasons, we have previously opposed a permanent site at 115, as we strongly oppose to a temporary site at this location. Mr. Mancini of the Working Center, who owns 115 Water Street North, has already shown plans to include injection booths at Water Street. Now proposes a hydromorphone clinic as a possibility. That could not be incorporated, could that not be incorporated as well into 150 Duke Street as part of the wraparound services? Rather than spending tax dollars on temporary site facility, those dollars could be spent on outfitting 2 temporary booths and a washroom inside the permanent site at 150 Duke. Or following this, the public health building on Francis, which I think is referred to as the Lang Health Community Center, all that will require is a room for 2 booths, as the City of Guelph currently operates their harm reduction services with 2 booths as well. In conclusion, I cannot even begin to explain how significant a risk is to the safety and well-being of our residents if the temporary CTS site was located immediately beside their home. As well, I would like to remind the members of the Region Council that not only were we in opposition of 115 Water Street North as a CTS location, but this location garnered the least amount of public support as well. Again, I support the Region's decision for locating the CTS site at 150 Duke Street. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no questions. I just want to clarify that while there has been direction given to staff to investigate a temporary site, there hasn't been one identified,
Yes.
and you're aware of that?
Yes, I am aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah, we just oppose temporary might become permanent. Some situations go sometimes.
Okay, thank you for coming. I have no questions.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else in the chamber that would like to delegate? Seeing none, I would draw council's attention. There is a letter from the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council on your desks. I received it this week. It wasn't part of your package, but it cites the evidence from the Vancouver Police Department and the Mayor's Office that there were no concerns raised around increased crime around facilities that offer harm reduction, so I will just leave that for your information. And I would ask Councillor Rentz, as Vice Chair of Community and Social Services, if you'd like to bring forward the report that deals with this.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to bring forward the recommendations. So the Community Services Committee recommends as follows. 1, that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo take the following actions regarding consumption and treatment services in Waterloo Region. 1A, seek approval from the City of Kitchener to support an application to the provincial government for funding to operate consumption and treatment services at the location of 150 Duke Street West, Kitchener. 1B, instruct regional staff to work with City of Kitchener staff to bring a report back to the Community Services Committee on April 30th, 2019 with a location plan and costs to have a temporary site open within 2 months of approval with appropriate partners. 2, pending approval from the City of Kitchener, submit an application to Health Canada for a federal exemption to the Controlled Drug and Substance Act, allowing for the legal operation of supervised consumption services at the location of 150 Duke Street West, Kitchener, and submit an application to the provincial government for funding of capital and operating costs for consumption and treatment services at the location of 150 Duke Street West, Kitchener. 3, remove 150 Main Street, Cambridge from consideration as a site for consumption and treatment services and continue to work with the City of Cambridge staff and council to identify an alternative site that meets provincial and federal program criteria for consumption and treatment services in a timely and in as timely a manner as possible. And the last piece is number 4. When an alternative location has been identified by the City of Cambridge staff and Council on Public Health, proceed with consultation on the new location using the same methodology as per PHE-1DS-19-02. It's moved by myself.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong? I'd also draw your attention to the fact that in your package, item 12A is a letter to our clerk from the City of Kitchener that supports 150 Duke Street West as a CTS site. I see no speakers, so I would ask for all those in favor, please indicate.
Recorded vote, please, Madam Chair.
Okay, recorded vote. We'll just get our technology to catch up with us.
And vote.
That's great. It's unanimous. And I would point out that due to the change of the time of this council meeting, Councillor Clerk, who I know wishes she could be here, had a commitment out of town, but she will be here later. And that's great. Unanimous. So we turn our attention to the minutes of previous meetings. They're listed A through G. If I could have a mover. Moved by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Jowett. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Your council information package was distributed electronically, and there is part of it is the Waterloo Regional Crime Prevention Council renew members of the council for approval. Do we need a motion on that? So would somebody be prepared to move that? Councillor Vanovich, seconded by Councillor Kiefer. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. I draw your attention to the fact that there is a piece of correspondence from MPP Catherine Fife dealing with the Cambridge Ambulance Communications Center for your information. And we've already highlighted the City of Kitchener resolution re the consumption and treatment services. Could I have a motion to go into Committee of the Whole to consider reports? Moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. All those in favor? That is carried. First is the financial report on the water transmission main in St. Jacobs to Conestoga in the Township of Woolwich. The recommendation is before you. Do I have a mover? Councillor Shantz, do you have a question?
I'm not getting to the right spot at the right time, but I know there was a little confusion about exactly where that was. I think that's been cleared up between me and my staff, but I just wondered if the report needed to be changed or clarified in terms of closing Arthur Street.
Mr. Bauer, you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The earlier version that was published on Friday did have an error in the report. It has been corrected in the current package. Arthur Street is not being closed. It's Sawmill Road between Arthur and the court, the smaller court there. The name escapes me, but not as far as Northfield.
It's the other way.
I'm scrolling down here to find it.
So Councillor Shantz, does that answer your question? Have it clarified?
Thank you. I just wasn't getting to the spot in the report right now.
Okay. So now that's clarified, would somebody like to second that? Councillor Erb, all those in favor? That is carried. So we have a series of recommendations for tenders. Sorry. Councillor Nowak? You're moving them? You're moving all of them as a group?
Yes.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Galloway. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. So this takes us to committee reports, Planning and Works. Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move the 7 recommendations from the Planning and Works Committee and add one from closed session that has to do with a settlement with Bel Air Excavating and Grading and an additional sum of money in that regard.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Jowett, any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. We've already dealt with community services. Any reports, Chief Administrative Officer? Nope, man of few words. Okay, we have a recommendation for appointment to the Sunnyside Foundation Board. It's before you to ratify Ian Ingalls to the board for a term to expire June 2022. It's outlined in your report. Moved by Councillor Strickland, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That is carried. Any other matters to be considered under the Committee of the Whole? A motion for the Committee of Whole to rise and Council to resume. Councillor Foxton, Councillor McGarry, I want to say Councillor Catherine. All those in favor? That is carried. A motion to adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Erb, seconded by Councillor Jowett. All those in favor? That is carried. Any motions? Notices of motion? Any unfinished business? No other business? So we need a mover and a seconder to enact the bylaws first and second readings. They're written before you. Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Shantz. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. a motion to adjourn. Councillor Erb. Do we need a seconder? Okay. Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Thank you. I just draw your attention to the fact that we have another meeting starting at 7 o'clock.